Oh, hello. Welcome to my bar review show. Today is family law. We're talking about it. Family law involves marriage, divorce, child custody, and support. We'll think about that later. All right, let's get into it. Here we go. Marriage involves definition, the definition of marriage, ceremonial marriage, common law marriage, Hartbaum action, marriage agreement types, marriage agreement validity, unmarried cohabitants agreements, adoption, and UPA. Notice common law marriage and unmarried cohabitant agreements. They're two different things. Common law marriage is putting yourself out there as married, and unmarried cohabitant agreements are not, you're not claiming you're married, you're just claiming you're living together. All right. The definition of marriage is it's a civil contract. Parties must legally be capable of consent. Marriage contract cannot be modified or terminated without a state intervention. Ceremonial. Ceremonial marriage, parties must obtain a license and participate in a ceremony. The license requirements are you need capacity to marry, minimum age restrictions, parental consent for the young, a waiting period between the license application date and issuance date or ceremony. Medical testing. State can mandate testing but cannot condition the license on the results. Expiration date. Most states impose expiration date on marriage license, which varies from 10 to 30 days. So, you need capacity, waiting period, medical testing, expiration date. When is a license not issued? When one party is married to somebody else, when parties are too closely related, if the marriage is what we call a sham, parties can't understand act's nature, one or both parties is under drug or alcohol influence, and finally, a party lacks consent due to duress or fraud. So we have already married, related, sham, cannot understand, drugs or alcohol, and lacks consent due to duress or fraud. Same-sex marriage. Same-sex marriage is permitted in all states. All states and federal government must recognize same-sex marriage legally entered into in another state. Solemnization or ceremony. A ceremony must be performed in front of 2 or more witnesses. A judge, political official, or clergy member must solemnize the marriage. Common law marriage involves requirements, recognition of common law marriages, legal or mental capacity, intent. Requirements. Parties agree they're married. They cohabit as married and hold themselves out to the public as married. Common law marriages recognition. Under conflict of law principles, a marriage valid under the law of the place in which it was contracted is valid elsewhere, unless it violates a strong public policy. Legal or mental capacity. You have to be of age, not too closely related, and you have to understand the act's nature. Intent. Intent must be evidenced by words in the present tense. We are married, not we are shacking up or we are going to get married. Hartbaum action. It's a civil suit for money damages based on damage to jilted parties' reputation. It's abolished in most states. Marriage agreement types. Premarital agreement. Valid marriage is sufficient consideration. In many states, premarital agreement must expressly state its applicability to divorce. Separation agreement can define property division, spousal support, child support, custody, and visitation, Generally, it's merged into final judgment for divorce, or else governed by contract law. A property settlement agreement can settle economic issues entered into by parties before divorce decree is issued. Marriage agreement validity. In general, a premarital agreement is enforceable if each party fully discloses financial status at execution time. Agreement is fair and reasonable and voluntary. Must be in writing and signed by the party to be charged. UPAA requires party against whom enforcement is sought to prove involuntariness or unconscionable agreement when executed, and 1. She did not receive or waive fair and reasonable disclosure, and 2. She did not have or reasonably could not have had adequate knowledge of others' assets and obligations. Marital agreements modification. You can have a provision that prevents property rights modification, including spousal support. You cannot have a provision that prevents child support's modification. Unmarried cohabitant agreements. Cohabitation agreements. A contract between unmarried persons is invalid if the only consideration is sexual relations. Otherwise, it's generally enforceable. Unmarried cohabitants property division. Equitable property distribution to avoid unjust enrichment, resulting trust, constructive trust, or quantum meruit. Adoption. Natural parents' rights termination, voluntary termination. Biological parents give up their parental rights of minor child and consent to child's adoption by adoptive parents. Unwed father. Consent by failure to register constitutes waiver of right to adoption's notice and irrevocably implies his consent to adoption. Right to object can be denied if father does not demonstrate commitment to parenthood's responsibilities. Prospective adoptee must consent to his adoption if he is over 14. Court's involuntary termination typically occurs as part of abuse, neglect, or dependency case, or when consent to adoption is unreasonably withheld. Includes siblings' abandonment or abuse, parental rights over siblings' termination. Adoption and Safe Families Act. State can move for parental rights termination when child is placed outside the home, not with a relative, for 15 of the past 22 months, as long as state has made certain reunification attempts. Some states, adoption is permitted if the parent has abandoned the parent and child relationship. The objective test, parent failed to act in a way that indicates commitment to maintaining parent and child relationship. Subjective test, parent subjectively intended to abandon parent and child relationship. Adoption's legal effects. Adoptive parents have all of the biological parents' rights and responsibilities. Adopted child has all of the biological child's rights and responsibilities. Most states, no visitation is permitted between adoptee and his biological parents. UPA. Uniform Parentage Act. We've got assisted reproduction and gestational surrogacy agreement. Assisted reproduction. Maternity is determined by the woman who gives birth to the child. Paternity, the husband of the woman deemed child's mother is child's father. Gestational surrogacy agreement. All parties must enter voluntarily. Intended parents agree to be resulting child's parents. Agreement must make proper medical care provisions. Agreement may not limit gestational mother's right to make healthcare decisions. Consideration to gestational mother must be reasonable. Any party or court may terminate the agreement for cause prior to gestational mother's pregnancy. Agreement not approved by court is unenforceable. All right. We move from marriage on to the second part, divorce. Divorce involves annulment, divorce, property division, alimony, and domestic violence. Annulment voids the marriage and declares marriage as having never been valid. Void marriage, treated as if it never happened, does not need to be judicially dissolved, not legally recognized for any purpose. Prior existing marriage, later marriage is void. Some states allow marriage to become valid if one party had good faith belief marriage was valid and impediment is removed. Incest, marriage between related persons, prohibition. Mental incapacity, person can't understand marriage contract's nature, duties and responsibilities, lacks capacity to marry. Voidable marriage, valid until judicial decree dissolves marriage. Grounds, age, impotence, intoxication, fraud, duress, or intent lack. Equitable property distribution and annulment. Party may request equitable property distribution, spousal support, child support, custody, attorney's fees, and other costs related to marriage dissolution. Children. Children of annulled marriage are considered marital children. Annulment defenses. Void marriage. The only defense is deny impediment making void. Removing impediment makes marriage voidable. Voidable marriage. Equitable defenses of unclean hands, laches, and estoppel are recognized. Putative marriage or spouse doctrine. Party who participated in ceremonial marriage and believes in good faith marriage is valid may use state's divorce provisions even if the marriage is later found to be void. Divorce. Divorce and separation. Residency requirement. Most states require at least one party to be resident. Divorce grounds. No fault. Marriage is irretrievably broken and no reconciliation prospect exists. Irreconcilable differences must exist for specific time period prior to divorce action filing. Fault. Adultery. It must be shown spouse had opportunity and inclination to commit adultery, usually proven by circumstantial evidence. Cruelty. Plaintiff must demonstrate other parties' conduct course harmful to plaintiff's physical or mental health and makes continued cohabitation between parties unsafe or improper. Desertion. Results when one spouse voluntarily leaves the marital home with intent to remain apart on a permanent basis. Does not apply if parties separate by mutual consent. Bigamy. When one party knowingly entered into prior legal and existing marriage before entering into current marriage. Habitual drunkenness. Frequent intox that impairs the marital relationship. Imprisonment of one spouse for specified time period. Institutionalization for insanity. with no reasonable expectation of discharge or rehab. Fault-based divorce defenses must be affirmatively pleaded. Recrimination, unclean hands, connivance, condemnation, collusion, provocation, insanity, consent, justification, and religion. If you want to look for some of these definitions, you can pause the video and come back when you like. Property division. Community property. Most community property states require equal distribution of marital property. Some state courts have subject matter jurisdiction over domestic relations issues. Divorce-related property settlement modification petition is domestic relations issue. Unlike child support, UIFSA doesn't apply to divorce-related property disputes, so those jurisdictional rules do not limit states' jurisdiction. Court may exercise personal jurisdiction over individual if that person is voluntarily present in state and served with process while there. Equitable distribution. Most states' equitable distribution system objective is marital property's fair distribution, not necessarily equal distribution. Marital property. Most versus some states. Some states, all property owned by either spouse. Hodgepodge approach. But most states, all property acquired during marriage is marital property. Proof burden on the party asserting property is non-marital. Non-marital property, separate property. Property acquired by gift or inheritance, except for gifts between spouses. Property acquired before the marriage. Any award or settlement payment received for action, cause, or claim that accrued before marriage, regardless of when payment was received. And finally, property is excluded by parties' valid agreement. Marital property distribution factors. The marriage length, prior marriages, age, health, earnings, earning potential, liabilities, and both parties' needs. Contributions to education, income, medical needs, both spouses' retirement, homemaking and child rearing services. Value of separate property, reduction in valuation in marital property by one spouse. Standard of living. Each spouse's economic circumstances at divorce time. And finally, custody of any minor children. It's a lot of factors. Right, specific marital property types. Treatment. Professional licenses or degrees. Not property interest, but can affect alimony. Retirement or pension benefits. Marital property if acquired during marriage. Personal injury or workers' comp award. Some states, if action cause accrued during the marriage, proceeds or awards are marital property. Other states allocate proceeds or award between marital and separate property. Pain, suffering, or disability damages. Injured spouse's separate property. Consortium losses. Non-injured spouse's separate property. Lost wages, earning capacity loss, and medical expenses awards. These are typically split between marital and separate property based on award portion attributable from the accident time to the marriage's end, marital property, and the portion attributable to lost wages or medical expenses after marriage's termination, separate property. Goodwill. A professional practice's reputation and clientele is considered marital property in some states. Accumulated sick and vacation days. States are split on classification and timing. Property expectancy interest, not distributable. Social Security benefits, not subject to equitable distribution. Post-separation property can be marital property in most states. Unexercised stock options, marital property if acquired during marriage. Property transfer between divorcing spouses is tax-free. Transferee's basis in property is same as transferor's basis. Modification, not permitted. Property division is based on property's assets at the divorce time. Alimony. One spouse's monetary obligation to provide other spouse with support in income form. Alimony is awarded if recipient cannot provide for his or her own needs. Factors. Property to be awarded in divorce, child support, spouse's earning potential, and other spouse's ability to pay support. Spouse's living standard. Time to find employment or complete any necessary job, education, or training. Marriage length. Marriage contributions, especially those that enhanced other spouses' earning potential. Each spouse's age and physical and mental health. And finally, any marital misconduct. Support types. Lump sum. Fixed amount. Cannot be modified without fraud. Permanent. Awarded for dependent spouse's life remainder, unless certain circumstances occur. Typically awarded only when marriage was long, 15 years or more. Limited duration. Typically awarded when marriage was of short duration, but economic need for support still exists. Rehabilitative. To enhance and improve economically dependent spouse's earning capacity. Limited to time period, such as until spouse receives education or employment. Reimbursement. To compensate spouse for financial sacrifices made during marriage that resulted in reduced living standard to secure enhanced living standard in the future. This is rarely granted. Palimony. Support provided by one unmarried cohabitant to another after stable long-term relationships dissolution. Only available in a few states. Support modification. Party seeking modification typically has burden of establishing significant circumstances change, independent spouse's needs, or an obligor's financial abilities that warrant modification. Willful voluntary income reduction, no reduction in support payments. Spouse's death terminates support. Remarriage, if receiving spouse remarries, support may be terminated. Cohabitation. If receiving spouse cohabits with one who is not family, then spousal support may be modified if recipient spouse's support need decreases as cohabitations result, not automatic. Retirement. Effect depends on jurisdiction. Support during marriage. Necessaries doctrine, both spouses, or family expenses law. Domestic violence. Violence perpetrator must be in relationship with victim or household or family member. Generally requires behavior continuum, but single episode may qualify. Injunctive order, prohibiting defendant's further abuse of and contact with victim, can also include residence's exclusive possession, child custody, and support. Process. Ex parte order with limited relief followed by a hearing after notice to defendant. On petition for permanent relief, order's violation can trigger criminal penalties. All right, we finished with the second part, divorce. Let's move to the third and last section, child custody and support. It involves child support amount, child support change or end, child support award enforcement. Then we have custody definition, UCCJEA, child's best interest standard, visitation, custody enforcement, custody change, custody termination, parental consent, and child's rights and obligations. Child support, child support's right. Both parents, regardless of marital status, are legally required to support their minor children. Visitation rights can't be denied for support's non-payment. Parents can enter private agreements regarding child support payments, but cannot agree to any release or compromise that would negatively affect child's welfare. Non-marital children can't be denied child support, government benefits, or wrongful death claims. May inherit from dad's estate if paternity is proved prior to dad's death. Can become marital children when parents marry after child's birth. Father consents to being named on birth certificate. Father acknowledges he is child's dad, or judicial decree establishes paternity. Paternity. Evidence to establish paternity. Court-ordered blood test. Prior statements regarding paternity by deceased family members. Medical testimony on conception's probability or improbability. Dad's paternity acknowledgement. Time limit for filing paternity petition. This is unconstitutional unless a reasonable opportunity exists to pursue such action, and limit is substantially related to government's interest in restricting such action. Marital presumption. A child born to a married woman is child of that woman and her husband. Estoppel. Husband who is not wife's child's biological dad may be estopped from denying his obligation to pay child support when husband repped he would provide for the child, wife relied on his rep, and wife suffered economic detriment as reliance result. Personal jurisdiction over out-of-state parent. Court obtains personal jurisdiction over out-of-state parent pursuant to long-arm provision in UIFSA, Uniform Interstate Family Support Act. Child support amount. Child support amount. Based on child support guidelines, parental income determination typically includes income from any source. Calculating methods. Income shares model. Child should receive same parental income proportion as if parties continue to live together. These are in most states. Income percentage model. Determines minimum child support amount by using percentage of supporting non-custodial parents' net income, determined by the number of children supported. Child support guideline deviations. Rebuttable presumption, guidelines amount is correct. If court deviates from guidelines, court must give specific findings explaining and supporting the deviation. Once child support award has been paid, obligor cannot monitor how money is expended. Cost of providing medical insurance for child is included in child support award, most states. Child support change or end. Child supports change, standard, substantial circumstance change regarding child's needs or parent's financial situation. Most jurisdictions, there's no reduction for a voluntary reduction in obligor's pay. UIFSA governs child support change. Under UIFSA, state court has no jurisdiction to change another state's child support order if original state has continuing exclusive jurisdiction. Rule applies unless parties, including child, no longer reside in that state, or parties expressly agree to another state's jurisdiction. Child supports end. Child reaches majority age 18, child marries, parental rights are terminated, or child or parent dies. Extensions. Child in college, disabled adult child unable to support himself. Parent can be required to buy life insurance on his life for child's benefit. Support may be terminated if child is emancipated before majority age. Jurisdiction for child supports change. Court may not modify child support order rendered by court with continuing jurisdiction in another state, unless parties including child no longer reside in that state, or parties expressly agree to permit another state to exercise jurisdiction. If child support obligation aspect may not be modified under law of state that first imposed the obligation, that obligation aspect may not be modified under any other state's laws. Child support's tax consequences. Not recipient's income, not deductible by payor. Child support award enforcement. Civil contempt. Obligor with ability to pay may be found in civil contempt and can be sent to jail until amount owed is fully paid. Criminal contempt. Jail sentence may be imposed on obligor who willingly fails to pay amount owed. Other sanctions. Tax refund intercept, credit bureau report, driver's or occupational license suspension, asset seizure, wage garnishment, attorney's fees payment order. Enforcement in other jurisdictions. Interstate child support change and enforcement is UIFSA governed. UIFSA applies when obligor or child resides in a jurisdiction different from the jurisdiction of the original order. Once the order is registered in another state, order is enforceable in same manner and to same extent as child support order issued by original state. Only issuing state may modify original support order. Other states' responsibility is simply to enforce the order. Custody definition. Legal custody. Parents' right to make major decisions about child's life, health, education, or religion. Physical custody. Parents' right to have child reside with parent and the obligation to provide control in child's routine daily care. Joint custody. Parents must both be willing and able to cooperate with respect to child's well-being. Joint legal custody. Neither parent has a superior right to make major decisions. Joint physical custody does not necessarily require 50-50 time-sharing arrangement. UCJEA, or I call it UCJEA, it's UCCJEA. The purpose is to prevent jurisdictional disputes with other state courts on child custody or visitation matters. Initial custody determination. Court has subject matter jurisdiction to preside over custody hearings and either enter or modify custody or visitation orders if state is child's home state state in which child has lived with parent or guardian for at least 6 consecutive months prior to custody proceeding, or since birth, child less than 6 months. Was child's home state in past 6 months, and is child absent from state, but parent or guardian continues to live in that state? Significant connection jurisdiction. Court can enter or modify order if no other state has or accepts home state jurisdiction. Child and at least one parent have significant connection with state, and substantial evidence exists in state about child's care, protection, training, and personal relationships. Default jurisdiction. If no state has jurisdiction through home state or substantial connection jurisdiction, court in state with appropriate connections to child has the jurisdiction. Exclusive continuing jurisdiction. Court that makes initial ruling has exclusive jurisdiction over matter until parties no longer reside in state, or child no longer has significant connection to state. When court can decline jurisdiction. If court has either initial or exclusive continuing jurisdiction, court may decline to hear case if court finds forum inconvenient. Temporary emergency jurisdiction. Child in danger requires immediate protection. If no prior custody order exists, emergency order remains in effect until decision by child's home state. Enforcement of another state's orders. Registration of another state's order need not be accompanied by enforcement request. Expedited enforcement of child custody determination. Hearing is held on first judicial day after service of order, or on first possible judicial day. Warrant for child custody. If child is likely to suffer serious physical injury or be removed from state. Child's best interest standard. Determining child custody standard between parents. Primary caretaker during marriage, separation, and prior to divorce is factor. Race or religion cannot be used as factors in determining custody. Parents' sexual conduct. Factor only if parents' conduct has or will have a negative effect on the child. Third-party rights. Parents presumptively entitled to custody in case against third parties. Exception. Legal parent is unfit or parental custody would be detrimental to child. Child's preference. Taken into account if child is of sufficient majority. Guardian ad litem. Court-appointed attorney to advocate for child's preferences and act on child's behalf. Siblings. Generally not separated from each other. Domestic violence. Almost always a factor. Some states have created rebuttable presumptions in non-abusive spouse's favor. Visitation. Non-custodial parent allowed reasonable visitation with minor child. Visitation denial only when it would seriously endanger child's physical, mental, or emotional health. Restrictions, supervision, overnight visits denial may be imposed. Sexual relationship or cohabitation can be restriction basis only if adverse impact on child exists. Parent cannot be denied visitation for failure to pay child support. Third parties. Fit parent has fundamental right to care, custody, and control of his children. Parents' decisions regarding third-party visitation must be given special weight. In loco parentis, Visitation is sometimes granted to step-parents and same-sex non-biological co-parents. Typically, it's limited to individuals who acted in loco parentis with child prior to the divorce. Grandparent visitation, subject to special weight given to fit parent's decision. Unwed biological father has fundamental right to have contact with his child if father demonstrates a commitment to parenthood's responsibility. Custody enforcement, sanctions, compensatory visitation, attorney's fees, court costs, fines, jail time. Parent gets tort damages for time child is wrongfully out of parent's custody. Custody change. Change in circumstances standard in most states. Relocation may be permitted if legitimate and reasonable purpose for move exists. Custody termination. Child custody order terminates when child reaches majority age. Custodial parent's death. Custodial parent's death, surviving parent is usually awarded child custody. Parental consent. Medical care. Parental consent must be obtained regardless of parent's marital status except in emergency. Court can override parents' religious beliefs to prevent serious harm to child. Upbringing. Parent has right to raise kid as she sees fit, including kid's religious upbringing decision. However, parental decisions may be limited to protect child's health and safety, or if significant social burden exists, for instance, a contagious illness. Child's rights and obligations. Medical care consent right. May consent to medical treatment if over a certain age. May obtain abortion, birth control, STD treatment without parental consent. Torts or criminal acts liability. Children judged by more moderate standard. Emancipation. Child has all adult duties and obligations. Parents have no duty to support. And we're done. Thanks for visiting.